The return to work mandate is not a request, it's an order. Stay tuned. Hello, welcome to Workplace Wake Up. I'm Jen Shaw. Every week, I spend about 15 minutes covering key legal developments, introducing you to interesting guests, and providing some entertainment to start your workday. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Many of you probably joined us yesterday for our Return to Office Mandate webinar, which applies to all California state employees. So I thought I'd talk about that a little bit more today because some interesting issues came up during the session yesterday. First of all, understand that the governor of California, Governor Newsom, he issued a mandate, an executive order, stating that all California employees need to return to the office, okay, effective July 1 of this year, so a little less than a month from now. Now, he announced this back in March, and there's been a lot of hoopla about this. In fact, if you've driven on Highway 80, you may have seen a big billboard that was sponsored by some unions in terms of the traffic that this is going to cause. Kitty O'Neill has interviewed me a couple of times about this issue for KFBK. This is a big deal because since COVID, we've had a lot of people home. They're working, but they're working at home. This is an actual return to office mandate. And even if you're not a state employer, you're not a EEO officer or personnel manager with the state, for example, if you're in the private sector, you need to pay attention to this because it's coming, okay? A lot of employers are now requiring return to office. And remember, we don't say return to work because that makes it sound like people haven't been working. Okay, we call it return to office. So let's talk about this whole deal with the state, all right? This is Executive Order N as in Nancy -22-25. And basically what the governor said, which I happen to agree with from a philosophical perspective, is that in-person work makes us all stronger. This is his quote. When we work together, collaboration improves, innovation thrives, and accountability increases. That means better service, better solutions, and better results for Californians while still allowing flexibility. Okay, what is the flexibility? Well, the governor says that there may be some opportunity for folks to continue working remotely more than one day a week, depending on the circumstances. And interestingly, this executive order, part of it is really based on the fact that several private sector employers have already done return to office. They've already said, okay, you're coming back. So this particular order still allows hybrid work, right? Because we're saying 4 days a week you're in office or on location in the field, for example. It doesn't necessarily mean you're in the office, but it means you're not teleworking. And 1 day a week you can telework. So it's still a hybrid schedule. And the idea is that there are some case-by-case exceptions that address, for example, the fact when employees' positions actually require telework, so they actually have to be in the field, for example, or they work at a call center that is only a remote call center. And also if they don't live near what the order calls a duty station, the location to which they're assigned, or they were hired with some sort of telework arrangement, hybrid arrangement, if you will, that's either a 100% telework, 5 days a week telework, or a hybrid arrangement where maybe it's a 3-2 schedule. So the idea is twofold. One is to get state employees back to the workplace, whether that is an office, whether that is the field, wherever that is. The governor wants people to be collaborating, working together more, and really finding the efficiency that comes with regular in-office or on-site work. The other part of this executive order is about helping federal employees who have been laid off as a result of the president's executive orders. So part of the order requires that CalHR, which is essentially the HR department for state agencies and departments, has to identify job openings that align with the skills of these former federal employees. And particular areas of interest here for the governor are firefighting, weather forecasting and modeling, natural resource management, medical and mental health care, and the sciences. Okay, very broadly stated. So the point here is that the governor says, okay, we want you to be on site, on location, working together. We also want to take advantage of these very qualified federal workers who have lost their positions as a result of DOGE or whatever else is going on in the federal government. So there are some legal challenges to the validity of the executive order. I don't see them going anywhere, to be honest, but there are some folks giving it their best try, which may succeed. I don't know. In the meantime, though, state agencies, state departments have to get ready for this. And there are a couple of really significant challenges. One of them is location, space. After COVID, when leases came up for renewal, a lot of state employers, a lot of agencies and departments eliminated space. They decided they didn't need as much space because so many people were working remotely. Now they have to have space for these folks to come back to. Now, according to the Department of General Services, there is enough space. There has been a lot of building. So we've got some new space coming up. We have some remodeled space that's been repurposed and made into some offices, several hundred offices that are available here in Sacramento. Obviously, state employees are all over the place. They're not just in the capital. So Los Angeles, San Francisco, Fresno, Bakersfield, Oakland, a lot of these locations are having to look hard to find space. Now, what I want you to understand is, first of all, we have an obligation, if you're a state agency or department, to make this work, okay? And the Government Operations Agency, Department of General Services, and CalHR are trying to help individual agencies and departments with this issue. Now, space is one thing. The other issue that we're seeing a lot of is a request for 100% remote work as a reasonable accommodation. So usually it's of a medical condition or disability. It could also be a religious practice or belief. That's going to be much more rare when it comes to remote work accommodation requests. What you should know is the number of these requests has increased exponentially since the executive order was issued in March. So many employees are looking to say that it is medically necessary for them to be working at home. And here's the problem. I've dealt with a lot of these situations recently, where the employee will say, well, because of my medical condition, I need to work at home. Okay. Do you go grocery shopping? Do you ever leave your home? Right? Because the problem is a lot of these folks are out there in society all day long on the weekend or after hours, but they're trying to make the argument that they can't do that when they're working, and it's just not going to fly. There are some medical conditions that may justify 100% remote work, but it's going to depend very much on the essential functions of the job and the facts of the situation. So it's very important to think through, what are you actually required to do here, right? You'd better have a good accommodation process in place because, like I said, the number of medical condition reasonable accommodation requests has skyrocketed. And we're likely to see the same thing with religious accommodation requests. So remember, in both of those situations, the first thing you're looking at is, does the person have a disability or medical condition? Or do they have a religious belief or practice? Then you look at, okay, if you're talking about religion, what is the conflict between the employer's policy and the employee's religious belief? So in this case, to prevail on something like this, the employee would have to say that it was somehow against their religion to work on site. That's going to be tough, right? There may be some religion that says something about that. But again, there's going to have to be some documentation and some pattern and practice that where we can see what that religious belief actually is. That doesn't mean that you're going to get a note from the church or the deacon or the minister, because remember, it doesn't have to be an established religion. It just has to be held with the sincerity of a traditional religious belief, okay? And of course, a traditional religious belief is based on morals and ethics and what is right and wrong, okay? It's not a political statement. Now, if you have a disability issue, you say, okay, do you have a disability that is going to qualify for an accommodation? If you do, what are your limitations and restrictions? One of the mistakes that people make a lot is they say, okay, I have a medical condition and therefore I want to telework. Well, what are your restrictions? What are your limitations? What does the disability cause that you're trying to solve for by working at home? It doesn't do any good to just say, this is the accommodation I want, without explaining what are your limitations and what are your restrictions. Okay, so that's important. Also, once you do that and you identify, okay, there may be some restrictions that require this person to work at home, then you also have to look at, well, is it feasible? Can they do their job at home? During COVID, remember, we let a lot of people work at home, even though they weren't performing the essential functions of their job. Because our thought was, look, we at least want you to have a job. We at least want you to have somewhere to go, even if it's your house, right? And you're doing something. So we let a lot of reasonable accommodation stuff go in terms of, is the employee performing the essential functions of their job? And some of you who joined our Wake Up Wednesdays with Jen series that we had there for a couple of years during COVID, you'll remember that I said over and over again, if you're gonna let people work at home because of COVID, make sure you tell them, look, we're letting you work at home, but we know you can't perform the essential functions of your job at home. We're gonna let you do it because it's the right public policy thing to do right now. But we wanna make sure that you understand that when this whole crisis is over, we're gonna expect you to come back to work and do your essential functions, which you are not doing right now. Some of you took that advice, some of you didn't. I understand it's tricky and there's a lot going on. But at this point, when you're having folks who have been teleworking since the pandemic, potentially, so since March of 2020, and you're gonna order them to come back to work, you've gotta have a good reason for it, right? You have to be able to explain what is the legitimate business reason that you need them back for. And it's really going to come down along the lines of what the governor said in the executive order. Do you need them there for collaboration? Do you need them there to do part of a job that can't be done remotely, like managing someone? It's very difficult to have a close manager-employee or supervisor-employee relationship when the employee works remotely. It's not impossible by any stretch. We do it. We have some great employees who work remotely. But the idea is, it's harder. You have to think things through a little bit more. You have to have a little bit more of a broader vision about what kinds of things you can and will be willing to do as an accommodation. The other thing that I want you to keep in mind here is that the unions are going to be very involved with this. They already are. And so you may be getting notices from the union as you're directing people to come back to work. One of the things I want you to understand is this is not a request, okay? This is an executive order. The governor can issue executive orders just the way the president can issue them. And it's very important to understand that if you choose not to have your folks return to work, you are in violation, return to office. You are in violation of that executive order, and there are consequences for that. So be careful in telling employees, oh, we're just not going to worry about it. We don't think the governor will enforce it. That's not the best approach here. When the governor issues these kinds of orders, they're directives, right? They're telling employers what they should be doing. So it's very important, folks, that you have someone in your office who's working on these issues. You need to explain what return to office means. You need to make sure you've got room for everybody. You need to make sure that you have a way of deciding what day are they going to be working at home so you have full coverage. So it's going to require a lot of admin work on your part. But it's important, and this is an executive order, and until or unless it is struck down by a court, it is the law of the land. So July 1, 2025, you've got to have these folks back working 4 days a week in office or on site. All right, I want to thank you all for your time and attention this morning. I know it's a bit of a dry topic, but it's an important one, and it's got people all riled up. So thank you so much, everyone. Please send me your ideas, your suggestions. If you want to be a guest, let me know. Love all of your ideas. Love how supportive all of you are. We have thousands of people listening. I just got the stats this morning, and it's pretty amazing. So thank you. Please, again, let me know if there's anything you want me to cover that I'm not. All right. Thanks, everybody. Workplace Wake Up, including our guests and hosts, do not provide legal advice in this podcast. Do not act upon any of the information discussed in this podcast without first consulting a licensed attorney in your jurisdiction. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to spread the word, please share it with others. Post about it on social media and/or rate and review it. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, and email us at info@shawlawgroup.com.